One of the least talked about aspects of Doors is its incredible sound design and soundtrack. Very rarely do you find a Roblox game that even has a complete soundtrack, let alone one that sounds great and also complements the gameplay and sequences of the game extremely well. In this two-part series, I'll be covering all of the aspects of the sound design in Doors, beginning with analyzing the soundtrack and ambience in the hotel and the mines, before moving to the subfloors and closing up with those. So welcome to episode 1, A Quiet Shimmer. In the first episode of this mini-series, I'll be examining the soundtrack and atmosphere of both of the main floors. I'll be starting with the hotel and examining any sequences that have music or ambience in them, which covers most of the OST and will cover all of the major sequences in the game. Immediately upon loading into the game, you're met with the warm and welcoming theme of Dawn of the Doors. It acts as the game's lobby music and does its job perfectly. It makes you feel welcomed in its tone and provides a nice introduction to the game, pairing well with the aesthetic of the hotel lobby and the welcome achievement itself the first time you join the game. It also plays a very important part in introducing the first of many leitmotifs. A leitmotif is a recurrent theme throughout a musical or literary composition, often associated with a particular person, idea, or situation. Doors is full of leitmotifs, and this is the first that we hear with Dawn of the Doors. Along with the warm and welcoming atmosphere you get from hearing this track when entering the game, it also provides an atmosphere of anticipation and intrigue, not knowing quite what to expect when starting the actual game. So let's do just that and start the game in the hotel. Once inside of the hotel elevator, the most iconic track from the game starts playing, Elevator Jam. Elevator Jam does an amazing job at being a banger song and also something else, distracting you before starting the game. If you were like me when you played this game for the first time, you knew that it was a horror game and saw that in the description it stated a new unique horror game involving doors. So immediately, we're told to be on edge because of our knowledge that this game is a horror game. And again, if you went in blind without knowing anything about the game like me, you had no idea what to expect, making you feel tense as you load in. But Elevator Jam makes us immediately forget that with its fun jingle it gives us before the doors open. It gives us a short bit of relief before starting the game and being plunged into the musicless environment waiting outside the elevator. Although this area isn't completely devoid of sound. Rain drums on the windows outside as thunder roars. The slow crackle of the fireplace and the warm colors inside immediately set the tone and make us feel cozy and comfortable, despite us feeling uneasy and uncomfortable about what waits for us ahead, but grateful to not be outside in a raging storm. Having Elevator Jam be present at the start of the game immediately changes how the player should feel when entering the game. Then when removing it, it makes the game seem more quiet and more eerie. For the next little while, we're without music, forced to listen to the creaking and knocking of the hotel's walls as clocks tick methodically in the rooms that we pass. This part of the game really makes you feel isolated and alone. Hearing sounds like drawers closing and the walls being banged on by some unseen force makes us feel like something is watching us, or that something else is here with us. And again, if you were like me, you didn't know anything about the game, so any one of these sounds could be something that indicates an entity to arrive, but you just don't know that. But hearing familiar sounds like this makes us feel tense, unsure of where the sounds are coming from. A lot of inspiration for this video came from a video made by a YouTuber, Scruffy, talking about the ambience of Five Nights at Freddy's and how it amplifies the horror. In the video, he talks about two core subjects, absence of information and absence of action. Absence of information prevents you from planning properly, leading to more stress while playing the game. The absence of action prevents you from doing anything about the current situation, again leading to more stress. Now, since this is a video game, it needs to implement a way for the player to win. These two pillars can't just perpetuate forever because you'd never be able to win. So you introduce audio cues and visual cues to give the player hints, but absence of information works with you and against you. These audio cues deliver you information that is key to surviving the game, but they also work against you. Ambient cues that signal the arrival of an entity are advantageous and are necessary for you to survive, but ambient cues that don't actually indicate anything make you feel paranoid and unsure of whether or not you're safe to keep progressing. This absence of information works beautifully indoors because of its audio design, and pairs perfectly with This is our first instance of advantageous audio. Your first death in this game was likely caused by the entity Rush, a black distorted smiley face moving in a dense black fog. When entering a new room and seeing the lights flicker, you might be initially hesitant as to what it means and confused. But once Rush arrives, you survive him by hiding in a closet or under a bed. You realize how to counter him, using his visual cue of the flickering lights. But then why would you need the audio? Well, aside from building the environment and the character within the game, it provides a crucial aspect to Rush's design, being that the further you progress into the game, the less time you're allowed to hide for. The entity Hide acts aggressively towards you, pushing you out of hiding spots you're inside of for too long, which is where his audio becomes especially important. seeing that you need to use his audio cue to time when you need to hide. This aspect, like I mentioned already, has proved to be advantageous and helpful, giving us the information that we need to take action and survive. Another aspect that I really like about Rush's design is how intimidating it is to hear this chorus of lights smashing behind you. The pieces of glass hitting the floor as Rush turns the room dark. Each of the aspects of all these entities make the game complete with its incredible sound design. Each entity's audio is different from one another, and it gives them all character and makes them scarier. But back to the hotel. While walking through an empty hallway, we might hear this. You have a momentary panic. Why didn't he flicker the lights? But then the audio fades away. Rush isn't arriving. This is what truly varies the audio design of the game, the ambience. This ambient cue is designed to trick you, to be a red herring. While it initially sounds like Rush is coming, it's just trying to scare you and make you anxious. This might then immediately be combined with having Rush actually appear, leading to a confused level of stress. Audio fakeouts like this also achieve another goal aside from scaring you. They interrupt your recognition of the sounds that are advantageous. While Rush's audio cue is advantageous, being that it's helpful for survival, it also provides a great deal of stress. And after the first few times of encountering Rush, you've learned what to do when hearing it, or when seeing the lights flicker. You've learned to recognize these audio patterns and use them to your advantage. So when hearing fakeouts or other snippets of audio that are only there to distract you and muddy up your information, you get confused and stressed, unable to plan as efficiently. There's also the sound effects that are orchestrated by what the player is doing. They don't necessarily give you an advantage, but they fill the void and emptiness of what's going on around you and, in a way, provide a lifeline. These are called diegetic sounds, and are essentially just the sounds that are coming from things happening around you. One of my favorite examples of this comes from the 1980 horror film The Shining. There's a great moment of sound design as Danny Torrance rides his big wheel around the Overlook Hotel, going from nice soft and muffled carpet to the wheels rumbling on the hardwood floor. Doors uses very similar instances of this with its different sounds that come from the different surfaces you walk on, from carpet to hardwood floors and metal grating on walkways. I just think that these sounds complement the game's atmosphere so much better and make it more interesting. You learn to get more comfortable with the sound of keys jingling in your hand, and associated with being able to leave the room you're inside of, or even the sound of the door opening itself. But there's also a shimmering sound, coming from where you just grabbed that very key. Every time you find a room with a locked door and find this key, you notice this shimmering. But what does it mean? Well, you already know that. After your first run-in with Rush, your screen faded to a bright teal blue. A crescent moon hangs high over your character, who is now floating in a sea of water illuminated by that same teal light. A beautiful and relaxing melody flows into the sequence and quells any built-up stress that you may have just experienced. This is Guiding Light. Guiding Light builds the trial and error portion of the game, with each death giving you more information on how to survive. It momentarily deletes the absence of information and gives you help and tips to survive. Guiding Light is the cause of the shimmering coming from key objectives, and is designed to make you feel comfortable in its presence and to soothe your stress throughout the run. This becomes a very advantageous piece of audio for you and never changes throughout the entire game, giving you a clear and straightforward lifeline. Continuing on, you'll begin encountering more entities, hearing the deep guttural growling of Dupe behind his door, and another instance of helpful audio. Because, in the words of Sebastian from Pressure, it's probably not a good idea to enter a room with audible breathing. And the rain sounds also provide help to differentiate dupe doors and to find the next area in a dark room, being that you can hear the rain from other rooms and determine where it's coming from, providing more advantageous audio. We also begin finding dark rooms, and while traveling through the... what?
Was that the bite of 87?
Screech introduces a very important aspect to the game's sound design, a human sound, or the closest thing to it. Screech's psst noise is one of the closest sounds to a human noise in the game, making it feel very uncanny to hear. Most of the other sounds in the game sound like they're coming from a monster or something otherworldly, but Screech falls right into the uncanny valley of human sound coming from a non-human thing. It also works really well that Screech is a darkroom entity, only being able to attack in the dark, which I think makes it scarier to hear a humanoid noise behind you while in a completely dark cellar by yourself. Entering a new room, we hear this sound of these eyes appearing on the walls that blink dryly at us. While Seek's initial appearance is mostly visual, we get an incredible sound sequence entering this long hallway bordered by massive windows on each side. Reaching the end of the room, we see Seek appearing out of the floor behind us, beginning the first Seek chase and giving us Here I Come. This track is incredible and fits this sequence perfectly, giving us a suspenseful and intense chase as we run throughout the hotel. The sound design here is also very apparent and works amazingly well. The sounds of the crashing shelves and books clattering to the floor, the pounding footsteps as Seek runs after us, the final room with the shattering chandeliers falling from the ceiling, these sounds really assist what the Seek chase does best, which is creating an incredibly tense and chaotic moment, that gets you stressed and unable to plan well. None of the audio here is advantageous other than serving as diegetic audio to fuel the intensity and immersion of the chase, but it does help you to feel stressed and panicked. And this tethers back into the absence of information that you need to survive, creating this chaotic soundscape that confuses us. Now, two things I want to mention here is how great the beginning and end of Here I Come are. The beginning gives you this rising stinger that builds up until Seek gives chase and the music intensifies. It takes all of the suspense and build up from the previous rooms and releases it into another section of suspense and intense chase. Then, at the end of the chase, we're giving a calming release of all this tension, as the music climaxes into this very relieving track that tells the player immediately that we're safe. Coming to door 49, we get this reception room with two double doors marking the halfway point of the hotel. Now, this is one of my favorite soundscapes in the entire game, but one small part of it has been removed and it really disappoints me since it adds so much suspense and depth to this encounter. Entering door 50, the lights begin blinking rapidly as loud stomping footsteps reveal a creature from behind a shelf. It lumbers forward with a low guttural growl before a loud smash of glass to our left sends the creature running towards it. The lights stop flashing and the doors have closed behind us. The creature angrily smashes a lamp to our left. This is such an incredible sequence in the game. Firstly, the track Unhinged is so perfect for this encounter. It's tense, terrifying, and complements the visual design of the figure incredibly well. The way the beginning of it rises in intensity fits the opening cutscene so well, and even the name of it fits the creature perfectly. The figure is this unhinged and horrific creature that we've just discovered. Aside from the entities that possess a physical body like Dupe and Seek, as well as a few others, the figure is one of the only entities that is physically present and isn't spectral or ghostly like Rush is. Something about this cutscene that I really love is that it gives you all of the information you need to know to survive Figure. Not only can we visually see that the figure has no eyes, but when we hear the lamp fall over and smash, it immediately draws it over to it. This gives us the realization that this creature is attracted to sound. It is a perfect example of show don't tell. The game subtly but effectively tells us that sound will be what we need to manage, and it works. It creates such a tense and incredible environment and atmosphere when within the library. The figure's loud stomping footsteps and its roaring and growling always make it seem like it's stalking closer to us. And Unhinged has very good usage of this sort of violent plucking noise to create this very horrifying soundscape. Again, it makes Figure feel more monstrous and otherworldly. The next great deal of sound design comes from the player, suddenly not being allowed to make the noises we've become accustomed to for the whole game thus far. We cringe opening drawers to look for items and pay more attention to the noises that we usually make. We utilize the alarm clock to distract the figure, which adds a ton of depth to this sequence and its functionality. The entire sequence works beautifully because of all the sound elements interacting with each other. Another thing I have to mention about this sequence is the heartbeat minigame that can be triggered by hiding when the figure is near you. It'll wait outside and try to detect you inside of the closet by sensing your heartbeat. It can be terrifying to encounter this for the first time and needing to manage your heartbeat while the figure looms outside. The sound design here is amazing well. The low growling of the figure as your heart thumps methodically, it's an extremely tense moment that works well to flesh out the figure and the sequence overall. My only gripe with the design of the figure is that it doesn't have very many different voice lines and kind of just uses the same couple of growl and roar sound effects over and over. I'd love to see new sounds added for Figure in some future updates just to add a bit of variety and depth to this character. Now, the one other problem I have with this sequence is that they've removed one of the biggest builders of suspense before you even enter the library. For some reason, the devs removed the ability to hear Figure growling in door 49. This growling would play intermittently and added so much suspense since you can hear something inside of the next room but you don't know what it is, and your only choice is to go forward, so it made it feel scary entering this room for the first time and not knowing what to expect. I just hope that they eventually add it back. Moving on past the library, we continue through the hotel for a bit until we get to Jeff's shop. Jeff's Jingle is a straight up banger, and just like Elevator Jam, actually serves a purpose. It serves as the breaking point in the run where you're supposed to feel safe and respite. None of the entities here can hurt you, and Jeff sells a bunch of helpful items for the rest of the run. It serves as a confidence boost with your new items and also the amount of progress you've made, but perhaps more importantly, it distracts you momentarily just like Elevator Jam. It makes you forget the danger you're in right before being thrown back into it once you continue forward. Nothing new awaits us immediately upon leaving Jeff's shop, aside from what we've already gotten used to, but when we reach door 61 and enter a dark cellar, we get something odd playing from somewhere in the walls. Music, soft and slow, playing from somewhere in the hotel. We unlock the cellar gate and try to follow it, but we can't reach it from where we are. Going back into door 60, we see a hole in the wall and go inside. We find a strange door and yellow sparkles illuminating the hallway. The music is mysterious but oddly comforting. We don't have the resources to enter it, so it will be left a mystery that will be solved some other time. But curiously, it seems important. Important in some way that we have yet to figure out. We head back into the hallways and progress forward, seeing more of the hotel as we do so. When entering our next room, we only briefly see a long hall of tables and chairs before a blue fog engulfs us. Our vision breaks through the fog and we hear an echoey static fill our surroundings. Distorted glitching and swirling sounds that keep getting more and more intense. Something is behind us, now in front of us. Turn around, run away, the sounds echo louder and the static grows in volume, not only in our ears but our vision. Crackling and distorted whispers come from every direction. The next door is in sight. A loud static crackle sounds out as the ghostly figure in front of us passes through us. The culmination of noises swell in intensity, and in a quick and abrupt moment, it stops. The blue fog disappears and the sounds cease. We escaped. Halt's encounter is one of the best in the game in its sound design. The combination of Halt's visual design with his audio design is amazing. Having this transparent and ghostly blue character appear suddenly and unexpectedly is a great moment in the game, and the usage of the static crackling that gets more and more intense the longer you're in Halt's presence complements it so well. The whole Halt soundtrack is really cool, and Halt's whispering sounds also add a lot to the whole sequence. It's meant to feel very supernatural and ghostly, and I think it pulls this effect off perfectly since generally in media, ghosts are portrayed as giving off weird electrical signals and static, which the game uses very well to incorporate into Halt's design. It's a moment that catches you off guard and is intentionally designed to confuse you at first, but then help you piece together what's happening, which is sort of a trademark of the game. I also enjoy the small piece of diegetic audio that plays whenever Halt tells you to turn around, which gives you just a small advantage amidst the other static sounds that aren't really there to be advantageous. But moving on from Halt, I really just want to appreciate the consistency of the rain and thunder in the hotel. I mentioned it at the start of the episode, but it just adds such a nice ambience to the environment, and the atmosphere from it is sorely missed in the mines, but we'll get to that soon. It also pairs very well with the sudden appearance of Sally when she attacks you from the windows. Sally is a pretty short encounter, but I really like the ambience she has right before you see her face outside. Especially the giggling, which, similar to Screech, is such an odd noise to hear in a place like this when there aren't really any other humanoid sounds that are present. I also really like the ringing noises when she attacks you, which happens from the suffocation mechanic that is more present in the mines, which again, we'll get to soon and talk about. We're getting close to the end of the hotel and things seem to be pretty normal. We're seeing the normal assortment of entities, and aside from Halt, we haven't encountered anything new. Hopefully things stay that way, but if you know this game, they won't. A loud whooshing rises seemingly out of nowhere, and we hear the distant sound of books and other furniture falling over. The sound dissipates, but then returns with incredible speed as the whooshing static sound flies through the room. I love Ambush's arrival because it feels very impending and really sells the feeling of a fast-approaching entity coming towards you at incredible speeds, and especially once Ambush leaves, or so you think. The sound fades away, only to return with devastating speed and a terrifyingly loud jumpscare to boot. While games that use intentionally ear-piercing jumpscares to get a reaction out of you have gotten extremely old, Doors does it for the most part in a very satisfying way. The fear doesn't come from the jumpscare, it comes from the build-up. From the suspense knowing that it could happen at any time if you mess up. And I think it really works well for Ambush since you might get lucky enough to survive it the first time, but then it comes back and you're caught completely off guard and the fear that you're going to die sets in right before Ambush reaches you. Is the jump scare loud? Yes. Is it only loud to make you scared? I don't think so. I think it's loud because Ambush as a character is loud, and the volume more so intensifies the moment to assist in making you scared, but I don't think it's necessarily loud just for the sake of being loud. But we finally made it to door 89 and entered the courtyard. It's a lovely and relaxing area, made incredibly atmospheric by the rain surrounding us, and provides us an opportunity to breathe in this calming environment. And we need it because ahead of us is one of the most audio-based and intense sequences in the entire game. I cannot describe how much I love the greenhouse ambience in the game. It fits perfectly with this dark and foreboding environment, and the usage of these ominous swirling sounds coming from somewhere in the greenhouse are so good. Back when the Hotel Plus update came out, this was the scariest part of the game by far, and it's largely due to how dark it used to be, as well as the ambience here. It works very well to be scary and makes it sound like there's something in the greenhouse with you. And the reason for this area being so audio-based is because there aren't any lights, making it so you need to pay attention to Rush's audio cue so as to not die to it. I really enjoy having this type of environment in the game, since it forces you to tap into the audio-based part of the game, which is what this entire video is about. Eyes and Screech also spawn a lot, which can distract you and adds to the tense nature of this area. I also really like how the rain and lightning around you is so loud and amplified. You might already have a hard time hearing from Screech and the ambience in the greenhouse, and the thunder and rain doesn't help. Again, it muddies up your information and distracts you. You're still able to beat the greenhouse, it's just harder. By the time we reach the end of the greenhouse, we'll be at door 100 and get a brief information before we head inside. Door 100 brings us visually into a new environment, an industrial electrical room. Immediately, we notice the faulty lighting zapping above us and the limited lighting overall. We now find a large industrial door ahead of us with the green illuminated exit sign. We've made it. As we pull the lever on the wall, the door slides open with a grinding metal, and ahead of us we hear a scarily familiar sound. It's the figure. It roars angrily at us, and an intense track kicks in as it pursues us down the stairs. We run backwards into the newly opened up electrical room and hide. The figure's footsteps approach quickly from behind, and it stops in front of our cabin and searches for us. The heartbeat minigame isn't present here, but now we're trapped in here with the figure. Now, I mentioned how it was dark in here, and yeah, it's dark. The figure leaves to roam the area, and we now need to use our very brief visual cues and primarily audio cues to survive the figure. I now need to mention the incredibly tense and amazing track, Unhinged II. Unhinged II is so good for so many reasons. The first is that it builds very well upon the already mentioned Unhinged. It uses very similar parts of the track, but adjusts it to this new style and amplifies it. The way it alludes to Unhinged is great. Even going as far to use stingers and instruments from Unhinged and incorporating it into Unhinged 2 is just chef's kiss. It's such a perfect and fitting track for this environment. It feels terrifying, intense, and climactic, which makes sense since this is the end of the hotel. The track is calming in the most terrifying way and gives us a visceral feeling to the character of the figure. This track makes it sound like something is hunting you, which is exactly what it is. Something is hunting you, and you need to use every tool in your arsenal to survive it. I also really enjoy how the library uses more wooden-sounding instruments, and especially string instruments, to create its sound space for Unhinged. But Unhinged 2 uses more echoey and metallic sound effects to create its sound space. It's genius at making you feel like the soundtrack accompanying the moment truly matches the environment and the threat you're up against. Going back to the non-musical audio design, this area also requires you to pay attention to the threat you're up against. It forces you to listen to the sounds of the figure and map out where it is in comparison to you. You also have to be listening for your objective, that same shimmering you've become familiar with throughout your journey. This area uses so much great audio to enhance the horror in the environment we're presented with, and gives us the tools to survive this dangerous encounter. After you complete your objective of finding all 10 fuses and placing them into the box, it triggers a cutscene that completely changes the soundscape to a more action-intense one rather than a horror-intense one, and gives us the other half of Unhinged 2, being the intense version of it. The figure crashes out of a window, and we're told that we're safe, at least for right now. We get some nice audio of the fuse box beeping, which can be helpful since there are different sounds for when a switch needs to be turned off or on, which is required for you to complete the breaker puzzle. The music stays intense as we complete the breaker puzzle and hear a rumble as the elevator power initiates. We then hear the figure roaring and banging against the door behind us. We regain control as the figure pursues us for a short chase, intensified by the music and the adrenaline of the moment. We enter the elevator and the metal gate closes behind us. The figure rushes up to the door and slams into it, but we're safe. We're finally safe. The music encourages that realization, and we finally get a moment of calm after all of the stress since entering the greenhouse. The elevator begins descending to another leitmotif of Dawn of the Doors. The usage of a leitmotif here lets us know that it's over. Every time we hear this theme, it means we're safe. But this isn't like those other times. The music builds into a resounding slam, timed with the surprise arrival of the figure on top of the elevator. The elevator begins crashing down as the figure roars above us, falling into a mineshaft and away from the elevator. The music climaxes as the elevator shakes violently and crashes into a black screen. That was just the first part of this video. Now we enter the mines. We hear metallic screeching as we crash into the ground inside of the elevator and step out into this new environment. Immediately, the familiar sound of rain running against the windows is gone, and there's no more thunder. It's an odd change of ambience, and instead we hear dripping water inside of the cave we're in. We're introduced to some new diegetic audio as we power up the generator inside of the room and open the metal gate. Our change in sound goes from the very warm and wooden sounds of the hotel to being a mix of that, but now with this metallic industrial feeling. Not to mention that the already existing wooden sound design is made more harsh. The doors sound different when we open them, and the wooden barriers also provide a more harsh tone. It just feels different given the setting. We're no longer sitting by a nice crackling fireplace inside the hotel, but instead needing to make our way through the dirty and decrepit mineshaft of the mines. Now, I'll be honest, while I've given the hotel a lot of praise for the sound design it does, and for good reason being that it works very well for the design of the game, the mines isn't very good. or really unique. There aren't nearly as many ambient cues in the mines as in the hotel, and in my opinion it really hurts the final product, since there aren't as many mysterious noises to be heard that are designed to confuse and scare us. We will get into the new sounds that it does introduce, but the sound design just isn't as good as the hotel. One element of sound design that does get some praise is the flooded rooms inside of the mines, which feature nice water sounds as we wade through them, as well as dripping water like in the first room. And just like in the hotel, these sounds can be advantageous against dupe, being used to tell where the next room actually is. Other elements like the metal sounds of hiding in lockers, opening lockers, and opening toolboxes, all sounding very appropriate for the current environment. I do enjoy the echoey cave sounds that the mines does have, but there just isn't as much of it as in the hotel. In a way though, I do like how some parts of the mines feel very quiet, like we're in a sound-padded room where all we can hear is ourselves. It's eerie. I still think that the rain and thunder provide a more interesting audio backdrop, but the mines makes it a bit different. While walking through another dust-ridden cave room, we hear a giggling. Just like Screech, the sound falls right into the uncanny valley part of the sound design. It's a human noise in a non-human environment. We also don't see the threat immediately. Giggles cling to ceilings, and so far throughout the entire game, there hasn't really been any reason to look up, making it all the more shocking when it attacks us. But aside from the sound design being there to be scary or uncanny, it also gives depth to the character and makes us wonder why this creature makes these noises. What was it influenced by to make these noises? It's also unsettling how even after we remove the entity from our face, it just keeps laughing while on the floor, like it knows that it got away with attacking us. And on the contrary, hitting it with a glow stick is just hilarious. Making it a bit further, we watch as the figure drops from a pipe into the ceiling and into a cavern. While we're completely safe up above the figure, it still provides a moment of fear since we realize that it's back and that it's followed us. And while it doesn't impact us now, it will later. Stepping into the next room, the room begins to shake violently around us, rumbling in our ears and making it hard to notice what initially caused the earthquake. As the earthquake subsides, we hear familiar approaching entity, Rush, but something is off. It sounds like it's coming from in front of us. We quickly hide and watch it cross from in front of us, but coming from the opposite direction as to what we're used to. We now need to be even more vigilant for Rush since it now appears ahead of us. While walking through a dimly lit room, we hear another familiar sound. This time, though, it's Screech. We scare it off, but we're surprised. It, similar to how Rush attacked differently, attacked in a lit room and not a dark one. We need to pay attention to the audio of each entity more carefully now since they've changed and become more aggressive. Eyes plays a distorted warping sound and teleports ahead of us, another entity that possesses a new ability. And Hide is different, like completely different. We exit a hiding spot and hear whispering from behind us. Hide is now inhabited where we last hid, and just like when inside of a hiding spot for too long, interacting with Hide triggers a reaction that injures us and causes us to see words in our vision and make it hard to make out other sounds for a second, muffling our environment. While I didn't mention it in the hotel, Hide, similar to Halt in some ways, has some really great sound design in the whispering and static that we hear as Hide becomes more aggressive. I really enjoy these types of sounds for entities like Hide and Halt, and it adds a lot of supernaturality to the game. Now, Gloombats. I don't really even have a wordy or interesting introduction for these guys because they are not my favorite entities in their sound design. They're bugs, and they sound like bugs. They buzz and also have this loud roaring sound, which I don't hate, but for the environment the Mines is going for, especially one that requires you to listen to audio extremely closely, they're just too loud. I get that that's the point of them in their audio design, but unlike the other examples, it just doesn't work for me. There are good examples of distracting audio and bad examples of distracting audio, with this being one of the bad examples. Sounds like the rain and thunder in the greenhouse provide a manageable distracting background, but Gloombats are just so painfully loud that it just ruins the rest of the sound environment and makes it way too distracting and way too difficult to really think about what's going on. We see the figure again, but at this moment there really isn't any new audio or different audio, so there isn't much to mention. But things pick up a little when we find an orange gas leaking out from behind a door. Now, it isn't the gas itself which has any unique audio. It doesn't, since it's gas. But when we stay inside the room for too long, we begin to suffocate. Our vision begins to blur and go black, and our ears start ringing. It's a slow but alarming way to die in the game, and the ringing really adds to the immersion of the entire moment. That's something that all of the sound design really ties into making this game incredible. It's immersion. All of the diegetic sounds and audio entity cues do so much to immerse you in the environment, and it works so well. Reaching the midpoint of our run, we hear some more familiar sounds. That same dry blinking from the hotel. Looking around the room, Seek is back. We open up into a large ravine, with rain finally filling the void of sound that we've been forced to deal with for the last 42 doors. We reach the end of the room, and a familiar but new stinger rises in intensity as Seek falls into the water below. Seek fully forms and stands up as the music stops rising. It lets out a distorted, angry scream before breaking into a sprint in time with the music. In one of the next rooms, boulders crash down in front of us and wood shatters across the broken bridges that we're forced to jump over. This sequence does a really good job at creating a very chaotic and intense chase, just like in the hotel, but only it's even more intense than before. Seek's Here I Come leitmotif returns for this track, ready or not, and I really like the fact that the two tracks connect to one another and to Seek as a character. The simple yet effective storytelling of this track is great, mostly because we've already encountered Seek before, but now we're encountering Seek again, and Seek is probably very angry that we escaped the first time. That's why it works so well that this track feels more aggressive and the chase itself is more chaotic. Seek couldn't catch us in the hotel and is now very driven to catch us here. And on the opposing side of that, Guiding Light is very driven to save us here. Entering door 146, we run towards another broken bridge, but this time, we fail to jump and barely cling onto a wooden board hanging us above a deep cavern. The music here is amazing. It's timed so perfectly with the cutscene and drives this incredibly tense moment as we look on wondering what's going to happen to us. In a deep drop of the music and the game, we plunge down the cavern and land inside of a minecart, and the music continues, now even more cinematic and epic as Seek runs after us in pursuit. But we're not out of the clear yet. In fact, we're far from it. We navigate through these twisting caverns and avoid being killed by the dangerous paths on the minecart tracks. The screeching of the minecart grinding against the rails in a desperate attempt to turn and avoid death is very cool and immersive for this sequence. The breaking of wooden barriers and the still pounding footsteps of Seek add a lot to the intensity of the moment, and eventually, as the music swells up in an epic climax, we burst through door 149 and are saved as the minecart comes to a stop. Seek angrily barges on the door behind us and attempts to get in, but Guiding Light holds them off. The gate ahead of us opens and the minecart clanks along the rails rhythmically until we hear a deep rumble. Music begins to build as we get the reveal from ahead of us of a giant creature emerging from a cave. The entity roars at us and we grind on the rails onto a new track and into door 150. The creature follows us into the cavern and we gracefully disembark our minecart to this really cool deep drop before we're chased down the stretch of cavern until reaching a safe room. The metal gates providing some comfort as they seal us off from the pursuing threat. We activate a console and the doors suddenly open again. Already we hear deep rumbling and groaning from around us, which gives us our first instance of advantageous audio in this area. The second coming from the beeping on top of the terminal that we just activated, with the dish on top pointing to something important. While the Nest uses mostly visuals for its navigation and playstyle, audio is still important here. The sounds the Grumbles make can be used to determine their locations and is especially helpful amidst the dark tunnels that the Grumbles use to navigate through. Grumbles being related to giggles matches with the audio design of how they sound and the same uncanny and humanoid noises that they make in the form of their laughing. Overall, the soundscape here isn't nearly as scary as the library, but I do need to mention Ready to Rumble, which I consider to be the best part of the Nest's audio design. This track is great at creating this tense environment and uses this progression of different phases as you get closer to escaping to amplify this intensity. It builds the suspense of whether or not you'll be able to escape, getting more intense before you finish your goal. And after completing your objective, the Queen Grumble returns to chase you out of the nest to an awesome chase theme that more or less serves as the leitmotif of the mines. It's shown in the earliest teaser and is seriously one of the best tracks in the entire game now that it's been officially added to the Volume 5 OST. This track just feels so epic and adventurous for the mines and delivers this very cool supernatural synth which sounds so good. This chase is short, but the music gives a very cinematic close to the end of the segment, and Ready to Rumble is just peak music. Afterwards, we continue on through the mines and receive a visual change entering into the sewers. We get a little bit of rain coming into the room from above before entering a sewer pipe from down a ladder and making it into Jeff's shop. We hear a remix version of Jeff's Jingle, known as Jeff's Jam, and while I know some opinions on it are somewhat negative compared to the original, I think it fits the mines really well, mainly for the fact that in the track you can hear parts of it that sound like dripping, which fits the environment of the sewers perfectly. I also didn't mention this earlier, but there's a little change in sound with turning off the radio, which is a cool detail. And when moving around inside of the room, you can hear that Jeff's jam and also Jeff's jingle actually emanate from the radio, which I think is really cool for a game like this to do. The music here is diegetic and also ties into the names of the two tracks, since Jeff somehow made them, and also that the music is actually playing in the physical location that you're in. As an example, Pressure doesn't use this feature since the music in the background is non-diegetic when inside of Sebastian's shop. When you enter inside of his shop, the music starts playing but isn't coming from an actual source in the physical environment. Unlike something where when getting your dead drop items, you can hear Sebastian's voice coming from an actual radio. Just a cool detail I felt was worth mentioning. Jeff's shop here is less of a distraction from what's going to happen next, but rather a decompression point of what we've just been through, since a lot has just happened all at once. But when we do continue forward, we encounter the same stuff that we've been accustomed to up to this point, just like in the hotel. In terms of audio, it more or less stays the same for a very long time, but the visuals do change and fill that aspect of the game's progression and design. We encounter the figure again in a different room and are required to find fuses to escape. The difference in sound design here is that guiding light is especially helpful because of how small the room is. The explorable area here is so compact that figure can hear basically anything you do from any point in the room. There is a bit of leeway when figure's far enough from you, but it forces you to listen closely for shimmering to then make the commitment of deciding which lockers and drawers to open to locate the two fuses, leading to some very tense moments with the figure approaching you because of you making noise. We keep moving and begin to see Seek's eyes again. We enter a long tunnel room and reaching the end we hear a groaning from the Queen Grumble emerging from behind us and the beginning of Ready to Rumble. The Queen roars at us and we hear a familiar rising stinger as the water turns black and Seek bursts from the wall and screams at us before giving chase. We enter the sewer Seek chase and in the very next room, alarms blare loudly in our ears as boulders crash to the ground next to us. I absolutely love the addition of the alarms in this chase. They give the perfect sense of urgency and are possibly the best instance of sound design in any of the Seek chases, aside from the soundtracks included with them. They provide an extremely intense backdrop to the chase, and I love them so much. The best part of the content update, a literal alarm. The rest of the chase is great too. The Queen Grumble attempts to ambush us from a bunch of adjacent tunnels, and the roaring and rumbling of the Queen also adds a lot to the ambience. Having to slam down the doors in the tunnel section is also really cool for the sound design, and again provides a sense of urgency because the doors keep slowing you down. Another incredible section of sound design. Even though the Mines is weaker in its sound design and atmosphere than in the hotel, it can still absolutely rock. I wrote this in the script as an actual line and then realized while writing it that it actually has a pun in it, so I'm leaving it in. We have finally made it to the end of the Mines, door 200. We enter the dam and Seek suddenly appears to another track of their iconic leitmotif. The music rises in intensity with Seek's rising slime, and Seek lets out a distorted roar that echoes across the dam, starting the final fight. Oh Damn is another one of my favorite tracks in the game, and it sounds awesome. It's super fitting for a final boss fight and is so cinematic and feels like it has so much weight to it. It really emphasizes the fact that Seek has failed multiple times to catch us and is relentless in following us everywhere and is pulling out all the straws to try and finally kill us. Again, like with Jeff's jam, there's these accents of dripping sound effects that fit perfectly with the setting, and the way that it starts is great, and especially the way it culminates into this big slam that starts the boss fight is amazing. Just like Ready to Rumble, it progresses through phases as the player completes their objective, which makes it so intense finishing the fight. The rest of the sound design here is great as well. All of Seek's entities have different audio use, and the splashing of Seek's sludge as the hands wind up to slam into the dam is great. They also have this small bit of advantageous audio when they're about to slam down onto the player. You'll hear this quick rising stinger as the hands wind up, which gives you a short window to get out of the way. The mechanical cranking of the valves as you turn them, subsequently followed by Seek screaming as we attempt to drain them out, feels so responsive and makes Seek as a character feel very alive and very threatening. Sludge has these very shrill and distorted cries as it chases you, and again, I really love how all three of the different Seek entities have different sound design attached to them. It makes them all feel unique and very fleshed out. The slime also has these rising and falling sounds as it moves up and down like waves, which again adds a lot to this encounter. The Seek Room has the final instances of new sound design and has this visceral snake-like hissing and wind-up sound before it attacks, and watching it plunge back into the dam with this sludgy splashing sound is really cool, especially since it's literally being absorbed back into Seek when it comes down into the sludge. I also wanted to go ahead and mention how awesome Oh Damn sounds here. The final phase is super climactic, and finally putting Seek down the drain is an epic ending to a fight. Finishing off Seek, we're left in relative silence with only the quiet ambiences that the mines have surrounding us. Opening the metal gate that we just powered, we hear the faint dripping of rain coming from a manhole in the ceiling. Using the ladder, we begin to climb out, and just like at the end of the hotel, we hear that relaxing Dawn of the Doors leitmotif. We climb out into a dark and rainy forest and set off down a path towards the castle. The rain and thunder here finally fills the empty void of ambience we've experienced all throughout the mines, finally bringing us some peace of mind. We approach the large castle doors to a hopeful and relaxing melody, and as the doors squeak open and we peer inside the warmly lit interior, we begin to step inside, and as we do, a low rumbling begins to fill our ears as the Queen Grumble bursts from the ground behind us. The mine's leitmotif begins to play once more, and as the Queen approaches us, we duck inside and look back, and a dark, sludgy hand rises up from behind the Queen and digs its fingers into her eyes. The leitmotif changes suddenly as Seek consumes the Queen with its sludge, and as the slow, ringing stinger of Seek's theme echoes through the air, Seek rises out of the Queen and stares us down as the doors close behind us in a climactic slam. Seek isn't done with us yet. See you soon. What an ending to the mines, and one that I unsurprisingly think is amazing in the sound design. The changing music from the Grumble's leitmotif into Seek's is so good, and the echoing and fading accents of Seek's theme as the cutscene ends makes it even better. Seek is the main antagonist of the mines, and the soundtrack lets you know that. It solidifies the fact that Seek is a dangerous entity that will not stop until it gets what it wants, or until we somehow inevitably defeat it. The deep wails of the Queen as it cries out in pain feel super heavy and really give us this impression of a giant creature that's just been injured by something else. But either way, that more or less wraps up the end of this video in discussing the incredibly immersive sound design and soundtrack of Roblox Doors. Keep in mind that this is only the first episode, and there will be a second part discussing each of the subfloors in about as much detail as I discussed the main floors in this video. Now, I want to leave you with one final piece of sound design that I didn't mention: the exclusion of one particular entity found on the main floors. The reason why I didn't mention it before this point is because we still had time, but we've just run out.